Welcome to Money Isn't Everything. I'm Mary Wisniewski, Cornerstone Advisors, editor-at-large, and host of the show. In today's episode, there's a change of schedule, and that's because I wanted to talk about the wildfires here in California. So you'll hear me speak today with Matthew Goldman, a Fintech founder multiple times over. Now he heads and founded Totavi, a Fintech product consultancy company that is based in Pasadena. I live in Los Angeles, and today on the show, we talk about the fires, some ways you can help if you wish, and we also get into card trends and what open banking can and maybe can't do. Here's our conversation. Well, hello, Matthew. Welcome to Money Isn't Everything. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's quite a moment in time. We're both in California, and I would say we've both been lucky. It's this episode is dropping 1 week later, but we're still in the thick of like fires and processing it emotional, and we wanted to start there in the conversation. So I don't know, Matthew, you wanted to kick it off, like experience that you've been forced into.
Yeah, I mean, it's been terrifying. And I think I live in Pasadena on the west side, and my family is safe and my home is undamaged. But the level of destruction and devastation in the community is really astounding. We were evacuated for a few days, kind of in the middle of the night, Tuesday night. I grew up in the mountains of New Mexico, and I had, when I was a senior in high school, a huge forest fire, and the whole town was evacuated, and a big portion of it was lost. And so I'm pretty paranoid. I've been joking with people that I've been using Watch Duty as a paid subscriber for years now. I know everyone's like, "What's this new app?" I'm like, "Oh, it's my favorite. You can track all the fires." So
Yeah.
we got prepared on Tuesday night when the fire started. Like we were, checked our go bags and all that good stuff. And I was awake in the middle of the night when the police came on our street and told us to evacuate. So it was very scary for my kids, but we're okay. But now I think the hard part is just beginning in many ways. A lot of people have stepped up and donated too much stuff, and there's too many volunteers, and that's awesome. But the real work is going to be years long, and it's going to be the people who are still helping in the long run that are going to make the really big difference.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. So I definitely want to throw some ideas to listeners of ways that might be of use. And just backdrop for me, I'm in the Hollywood area, so I was closer to the Sunset Fire, but that was contained relatively quickly, and I did leave for the night. And Matthew, I'm not. That was like I've had to evacuate before in New York City because of hurricanes, but it's like the first fire situation, and I can see why you would have that deep paranoia having experienced something before. And I do want to bring up, like, yeah, the help will be needed for a very long time, and I think it's people want to donate like as soon as something happens, which is so wonderful, but like to up to keep going at it, and to also like just know that people don't have lost the way they earn income and their homes. And like, that is not a problem that will be solved in the short term. So, wondering, what are some resources you think are actually useful to, let's say fintech entrepreneurs or bankers and credit unions listening, of if they want to be helpful, what would you recommend for a way to be helpful?
Yeah, I think, as probably people in finance know, like cash is what really matters. I personally am a big believer in kind of like community-based donations. I'm I think it's really interesting, like the emergence of, it's been years, but of GoFundMe and all the individual kind of fundraisers, and there's a lot of interesting challenges there in terms of, I think, equity and distribution, because people whose GoFundMe's are raising a lot of money probably know people who have money, and I worry a lot about the people who aren't part of that network who are deeply affected. And I think there's some really great um, broader organizations. So one that I'm particularly, I did a, we're doing like a matching donations out of my consultancy for is the Pasadena Community Foundation, which, if you're familiar with United Way, it's sort of like a United Way in that it's a nonprofit that funds other nonprofits, but it's based here, and they have an Eaton Fire Relief Fund, and I'm sure there's similar things in the Palisades that there's all these organizations doing all these things, and it's awesome that it's almost overwhelming right now. But you know, it's going to take years for people to get back into houses. Even if your house didn't burn down, if you're in the zone, you have to strip out your walls and replace things because of the smoke. And um, you know, kids like aren't back in school, and I feel really terrible for the kids. I mean, they just went through COVID, and now there's this, and just the interruptions. But I think cash and making the things like waiving payment fees, right? Like if a bank wants to make a difference, right, they could waive their 3%, or they could waive late fees or overdrafts, or be proactive. I heard Lululemon just gave everybody who lives in a zip code affected by the LA fires like a $200 gift card, like
Oh,
which is great. I mean, they have good margins, so it's probably not that expensive for them. But like, I think that the biggest way a bank or a fintech or whomever can build their brand and help is to just proactively do stuff. Don't make people apply. You know where these people live. Like that's a thing that
right.
banks have. We know where people are. They're in a zip code, whether their house is destroyed or not. Like, okay, just waive their monthly fee, or realize that maybe they're not going to get their direct deposit because the job stopped. Like, make it as easy as possible for them to just get that benefit, because it's probably not really that expensive, and it will build that deeper relationship and serve the community.
Yeah, I would, yeah, definitely underscore that. Like that seems uh, the I want to say the bare minimum, but it's sort of, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's that's super important. Um, and I'll make sure I'm going to drop some of these links in the show notes if anyone wants like specific recommendations of places to donate. I'll put some in, and if anyone wants me to share someone's GoFundMe profile, just let me know, and I'll add it to the show notes as well. And Matthew, I'm thinking a lot about this too. I care a lot about financial health, and of course, this is something that basically undoes someone's financial health, even if they're even if they have money, let alone
Yeah.
don't. Um, and this is such a big question with no obvious answer. But I mean, where does one start to rebuild? I guess, or like how does one start thinking about financial health stuff and when like one of the worst things has happened?
Yeah. It's really amazing. Like, again, even if you have insurance, whatever, I mean, I think home policies have huge deductibles on them typically, which maybe people aren't really prepared for. It might be five or $10,000 on a home deductible. A lot of folks will not be able to rebuild necessarily with the money that's in their policy. They might be underinsured. And I've seen a lot of really sad stories of people who had cash in their house,
Oh no.
um, huge amounts. One story in the LA Times is like 16,000. Someone said they lost $40,000 in treasury bills.
Wow.
I don't know why that's in your house, but this is the thing. Like, people don't trust banks, or they're not comfortable, and they're doing these things, and it's digging that hole deeper. And I think that, getting that immediate cash assistance is important. FEMA is giving immediate cash assistance to people. Like, just um, almost be greedy. Like, I think there's a inclination to, figure out like it's very, I don't know, American in a way. Like, I'm going to tough this out, or I'm going to figure it out on my own. And I think people should avail themselves of every resource possible, because it's going to be a longer, harder road. And then really fight for themselves. I mean, the other thing that I think is very concerning is the stories of gouging, um,
Yeah. And scams.
and scams, and just, unfortunately, disasters always bring out both the best and worst in people. It's a very extreme situation, and everyone's under so much stress. I think you'll have to find, ways to give ourselves and each other grace, because everyone's on edge and upset and mad, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's mad at the situation and mad at whoever they think caused it or didn't do a better job. And and we have to try to acknowledge that where that is, it's happened. And so how do we, as you said, like build against it? And so I think, you know, people might be inclined to run up a big bill on their credit card because it's easy source of cash, but like we know how interest works, that'll get more expensive. So how can you just get folks some dollars that they can get a hotel room or get a new car so they can get to work, right? Or find a new job. I think a lot of people are very concerned about, especially folks on the lower end of the economic spectrum, losing work, right? If you cleaned houses in Altadena, you might not have any customers anymore. If you were working on a construction site in the Palisades, you might not have a job and maybe you live there and you also don't have a place to live. I think there's this unfortunate perception that
Mhm.
California is filled with rich people and the
Yes, there
Palisades
is.
were filled with rich
Yeah.
people. And like the Palisades is filled with rich people, but not exclusively. There are
Yeah.
apartment buildings and small homes and people who lived in these homes for 50 years. And it really affects everyone. And a lot of people, we talk a lot about how people don't have $500 to like fix a flat tire or whatever. That's the famous, fintech story. I mean,
Yeah.
magnify that by 100 and you have losing a house.
Yes, and, something else about the Palisades, it's like it's this older community too, so it's just even hard to imagine, you're in your 80s and your 90s, and yeah, maybe you do still have money, but, like, you don't have time, really.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. And people maybe, didn't lose their home, but they don't have utilities or it's not occupiable right now, right? Like it's not as simple as you have a house or you don't, or you can go back to your house or you can't. Like even if, you're not, you know, the people who lost, whose home survived and are surrounded by homes that didn't survive, they can't go back anytime soon. And when they do, it'll be a construction zone and maybe they don't want to. It's like, it's just so immensely disruptive to everything.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's hard to take in, and I did wanna take a moment to say thank you to everyone who's been, like, reaching out. It was a little hard to follow up at times. I lost power for a little bit, but, thank you, it meant a lot, and, I'm sure you were getting that too, Matthew.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And I appreciate that most people let me just ignore them for a while.
I know, which is hard to do because
Yeah,
they're nervous, but
we just fled to, like, we went to a hotel in Anaheim. We wanted away from the air quality, and Anaheim has a lot of hotels, right, for Disneyland. And we just, like, no one could do anything, right? Like, we just kind of all sat around and stared at screens and read, fire updates and whatever. Like, it's very hard to get back into the swing of things. But also, then sometimes also people say like, well, it's weird because like the restaurants are open in old Pasadena and people are going back to work. And I'm like, well, like not to not acknowledge it, but like the economy needs to move forward. Like, I don't know, do the people at that restaurant, did they lose their apartment and they need income? Like stopping the economy doesn't help either. It's a very weird, disconcerting, like disconnected experience. Like today the sky is blue. And if you look out
yeah,
my backyard, like, I mean, I lost a bunch of branches, but nothing major. And I had ash on my property and all that stuff. But like, I've cleaned up. Like, it looks fine. I mean, we're not fine. The city isn't fine, but there's these like snippets of fine. And it's a very weird mental connection to be like, well, I still should go buy food or buy groceries or get my car fixed because those people depend on me spending my money, like, to keep the whole thing
yeah.
going, even if maybe they're staying in a hotel or a shelter right now or sleeping on a friend's couch.
Yeah, it is this, like it's surrealism to me, and, like, even, like, I had to take my dog to the vet because he had something come up, and like, even that felt weird, but then
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, well, it's still it needs to get done, and it can get done, so it's gonna get done." Um, but, hard transition, but I do wanna talk about innovations in cards because you run a consultancy and specialize in fintech, and you founded companies. You founded a company that, like, put all your cards in one place to, like, decide which one to use to, like, maximize rewards, Wallaby, and, we do go back quite a ways because I
Yeah.
believe we connected at when the site was called Bank Innovation.
Yes.
Um, and I'd be remiss to not also quiz you about like interesting things going on in fintech. And I'm curious about several things, but um, one area is like what's interesting in card perks these days?
Well, One thing I've been thinking about a lot is the transition of the like it's this macro thing about the transition of the economy to subscriptions everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and premium cards are a subscription of their own, right? You pay an annual fee. And like, I think if
Mhm.
you go back 20 years, there were very few people paying annual fees on credit cards. And it was like sub 20% of the offers. And it was, really MX Platinum and, maybe, business traveler types. And now they're much more common. And the cards are becoming a lifestyle platform, right? So like, I think this one's like, there's this whole funny way of stacking it all together. So bear with me. This is real card
I will.
nerdery. But
Yeah, that's super. That's a warning. He's super card nerd.
if you have an Amex Platinum, you can get Walmart Plus for free, which is normally $13 a month. You just charge it to your Amex Platinum and then they rebate you the money. And if you have Walmart Plus, you get a bunch of other stuff. Like you get a virtual telehealth vet service. You get
Ooh.
25% off at Burger King. You get, I think, I might get this one wrong. I think you get Paramount Plus. Maybe it's Peacock. Can't keep them straight. But like, so there's this like stacking of these benefits inside each other going on. And you can look at an Amex Platinum and be like, why would I pay $700 for a card? And you're like, well, if I'm going to do all these things, it's actually like a pretty good deal. And I think that's really interesting because the card has moved beyond like this is a way to pay, and maybe it
Hmm.
has some perks that make sense, like a card linked offer, like use your card at Walmart and get 10% off. Like that sounds very that's a bank type deal, like it's related to the transaction. But this other stuff, like you could use your Amex Platinum for nothing except for these deals and save money. And so I think that's really interesting the way the banks have tried to kind of shift from just a part of your life into more of your life. Like now you're like, well, if I cancel my Amex Platinum, and I'm picking on Amex just because, but Chase has deals like this and everyone else does too. Like you'd be losing all these other benefits.
And I wonder, I mean, I have to think, it's got to still be a smaller slice of the population paying attention to all of that, right? Or is it, or do you think it's
I
wider?
think it is, but I think it's been growing. So one of my
Yeah.
essays here, so thinking about back when, like way back when we first met, and I started Wallaby, like at that point, I would imagine if you asked who knows about the pointsguy.com or reads it, you would have heard very few people. I mean, I think there were maybe 1 million monthly visitors on that site. And I
Hmm.
sold Wallaby to Bankrate, which you have worked at,
I have worked at, yes.
and Bankrate owned the Points Guy at the time that I sold Wallaby, which was a secret. Actually, I was sworn to secrecy when I learned that by Bankrate,
Oh.
and I left Bankrate after the Red Ventures acquisition years ago now, but it was doing I don't know 10 or 20 million monthly unique visitors. Like there's been this growth of life hacking, travel hacking, like this idea of I'm going to get one over on the system, which people, kind of hate banks. I think that's just a general perception.
Yeah.
And so this idea that you're taking advantage of Chase when you use your miles, I mean, I don't think that's true because Chase is very smart and they wouldn't make money losing products. But people feel smart when they do it, and the Points Guy and other sites like that really feed into that. And so I think that has expanded the universe. If you were to chart the number of people in like Reddit for credit cards and Reddit for card churning, I mean, just through the roof. So I think there's still a bunch of people who don't care. Don't get me wrong, like who are
Yeah.
just using their debit card to buy stuff and don't care. But I think it has grown beyond. We used to think of it as like management consultants and business travelers were the only people who cared, and now I think it's very much a cultural phenomenon.
I agree with that. And it's definitely like I use this for my lifestyle, like Built being another example of
Yeah,
like, wow, did that win over a bunch of people? And the perks, you can sort of see, I almost view it, I don't know if this is the right comparison, but it's almost like a glossy magazine. If you'll get, like this is your glamour card, if you
yeah.
fit this is, yeah, that's what I've come to believe.
I do think it's very much become in certain circles, and maybe it's the mass affluent more than anything else, but it's a status symbol, right? Like there was a jokes when Chase Sapphire came on the scene, which was a huge turning point, um, and it was almost like the joke was if you get a bunch of millennials and they go out to dinner, how many of them put down Chase Sapphires at the same time to pay like to split the bill, and it was like
I would be one.
yeah, as would I, right? But it's like it says I'm smart, I'm cool, I care about travel and dining. There's also, I think, this again, this broader cultural thing about experiences over things.
Yes.
Um, which I don't know. I can experience things. That's kind of how I feel like I guess I'm kind of materialistic. I like to collect stuff a little bit,
Hmm.
but like it's like, oh, you're cool if you go to concerts, if you go to shows, if you go out to dine. I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up like very solidly middle class. We didn't go out to eat, and if we did, it was at McDonald's on a road trip, right? So like the whole idea of eating out frequently is really different now, I think, and the cards play into that. So like you don't have to have a Chase Sapphire, but if you don't, people might wonder why you don't, and like, do you know you're missing out? And that's really different. Like in airport lounges everywhere, it's I think it's way more prevalent, and it's this aspirational, experiential thing, and it's totally fascinating to me because banks are normally considered like, oh, it's very boring. Like money goes in and money goes out, and sometimes interest is charged or earned or whatever. But like they're coming. I mean, they've always been critical to our lives, but they've really cemented this by being, part of the cultural conversation in a way I don't think you went back 30, 40 years, everyone would have thought banks would be like that.
Yes, I agree. I also agree with that. And you're making me think because my last guest was from the Bank of New Hampshire, and they happened to be issuing corn debit cards actually, and that's of course because it
Yeah,
will biodegrade better. But like, do you even think like the look and feel of the cards is part of the appeal? Like, let alone
absolutely.
rewards. Just like, hey, this is prettier. Okay, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you know what? Metal cards are sort of stupid and I love them. Like they're
They
so expensive.
are definitely stupid.
Um, People, it's funny when I did the last company I started before the consultancy was a wine rewards credit card. It was metal. It was like
Hmm.
premium. I love card design. I've been doing card design for almost 20 years. You can make really nice cards and it really matters. When I started my career, I worked at Green Dot and we made reloadable prepaid cards, right? The predecessor to the neobank. And I was part of the team that helped launch the original Walmart prepaid Visa. And this was back when Walmart's logo was like the smiley face. And they were like, can you put the smiley face on the card as big as possible? And we were like, hey, that's cool, but how about no? Because we have this internal rule and it's called the date test because like Green Dot's like a lower end brand. And we don't want our customers to be ashamed of it. And so we always said, like, if you're paying for dinner on a Green Dot card, you have to be not embarrassed by our card design. And so we got them to do this like beautiful set of the Walmart stars in silver, and it was a very nice card, and it worked, right? And it's like, again, the card says something about you, and people love metal cards. Again, even though like half the time they just tap their phone now, it's very silly.
That is very silly, but I love that date test thing because now you're making. I think it was my dental hygienist who was talking about. She wasn't mocking this guy, but maybe a little bit. Like he was at dinner, he had put down a coupon for like 2 for 1 special kind of thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and so he wasn't embarrassed. He's getting a deal. Good for him. But like, yeah, you do have to think about these like psychological elements
Well,
to.
absolutely. That used to be part of the argument in favor of card linked offers when they first came out was no one knows you're getting a deal, right? Like if you're getting
Yeah.
20% off, you can be like, hey, you know, date of mine, let's go to the steakhouse. I'm just going
Hmm.
to pay. You don't know I'm saving money. Like I'm a smart consumer and it doesn't really matter to your date. But like if you go to the steakhouse and you bring out a coupon, you might get looked at. Like it's not very classy. It's kind of a funny thing because we all love to save money. So it should be more
Yeah.
acceptable. But I think there is this, like, that's a really interesting factor of like how card payments and digitization of things have enabled experiences like, not forgetting your coupon because you just clicked it on your app and it automatically saved and things. And so, yeah, but the metal card, I mean, I have a ton of metal cards, and every client I talk to, one of the very first questions when we're building card programs is like, should I get a metal card? And I have to be like, well, how much money do you want to spend? Right? Like they cost,
Yeah.
6 times more per card. Would you like to do
Wow.
that? Like, take Apple. The Apple card costs $30 to produce. It goes in a beautiful box, and then you never use it. The Apple card is designed only to be used on Apple Pay. Otherwise, you don't even earn as much cash back. But they're Apple, and they wanted it to look cool, so it does.
Right, because it has to align with the brand.
It
Like, hey, I
does.
got shoes not too long ago, and I was like, hey, I just love I love like the images they're using because it's more about the woman versus like the man. I often find like when it's like a woman's
Hmm.
thing, they're like showcasing how a man's like, oh, what a beautiful woman. But I love it when it's like, hey, now I'm this, boss bitch,
Yeah.
and like that's the imagery that works for me. but they sent also like a shower cap, like a cute shower cap along. And I was like, oh no, I am a sucker.
Yeah.
I am a sucker. Maybe not for metal cards, but like my own version of
Yeah,
it.
I think again, like there's a lot. I mean, humans, I don't know, I'm not an anthropologist, but like we're all very status driven at some level, right? It's probably innately built into our nature and all that. And all these little signals, are little status things around, fancy cards or getting into an airport lounge or access to events. Like a lot of cards do that, right? Like if you have an Amex, there's a bunch of venues where there's a separate entrance line, like at the
Hmm.
Hollywood Bowl, they have one of these. So if you
Oh, I
don't,
didn't realize that.
yeah, so there's a tip for
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Any Amex
Thank you.
network issued card, there's like a little line in the back, and you just tap it, and they verify it's valid, and it doesn't cost you anything. You go in at SoFi Stadium. SoFi card holders have a special entrance. Not surprisingly, like again, it's this idea of like, hey, you're getting something special because you bank with us. So
Yeah.
keep banking with us because we get you access.
Um, this is okay. So there's one segment on the show, and I'm about to do it, but it's going to take us in. I know we're running on time, but it's going to take us into open banking. But it's something that, well, that's what you said. But in this case, this is what you wrote, and it was in reference to open banking. And it's an open banking standard itself doesn't make someone leave Chase. It takes a better banking product to do so. Let's dive into that, and also let's dive. I know the CFPB is under attack right now, and what will happen to
Yeah,
1033. Nobody seems to know, but let's unpack that sentence a bit of what you mean exactly.
yeah. Thank you. I mean, we've been talking about open banking for forever, 10 plus years, and the data
Yes.
around it. And there
Talk
was
about
this,
suspense.
yeah, yeah, talk about suspense. And a lot of great fintech products depend on it. Like my product Wallaby depended on open banking data, right? How could we tell you how to optimize your spending if we didn't know what your spending was? And we were not a bank. We needed to, ingest that data programmatically. And the banks have always, traditionally had this opinion of like, well, if we let people have access to our data, they'll steal our customers. And then a few months ago, during this rulemaking for 1033, PNC came out and they were kind of like, we love it because we're going to steal everyone's customers. Like, the community banks are going to die because we can help people move accounts more easily. I agree that open banking makes moving accounts easier. And you have these
Hmm.
tools like Knot and other card switchers or Atomic and payroll switchers who use these API driven things to make the very painful process of like changing your direct deposits and changing your bill pay and changing your automatic subscriptions to new cards. Like that is a lot of work. But you have to decide you even want to do that. And you can somewhat tell how hard it is because of how much money banks still dangle in front of people. Like, I it's not a free toaster anymore, as the joke goes. But like, I get these offers. Chase is like, "We'll give you $500 if you move your bank account." Like, $500 is a lot of money. I'm like, I don't know if that's worth moving my bank account for $500. Like, that's how
Yeah.
painful it is. And if you have a truly better product, right? You have a great mobile app and you have all this great access, or if you have shown back, to tie it back to our original topic, like if a local bank here has a solid product and shows that they're going to stand up for the community in a time of need, they might actually win people, and open banking might help them win those folks, kind of focus on the community. But just it existing and the data moving around doesn't actually do anything because consumers are fundamentally like sort of lazy about banking, right? It's a lot of work to make these shifts, and I just don't think they're going to want to.
Yeah, like, because I think the evidence is, well, there's so much evidence, stats after stat. I mean, people just stay with their bank and then they add on other accounts as they wish.
Yeah,
But I think one profound thing that we all saw was that in Wells Fargo opening the phony accounts, those people didn't necessarily drop that bank.
yeah,
So even when you're, like even when the bank is committing fraud and it's affecting you directly, you might not even move your money because of the
yeah.
perceived work. And sometimes it is a lot of work. It's very rare for me to like set up a new account because I'm like, this is like tedious,
Yeah,
tedious.
it's painful. I mean, I have been using the same checking account for 20 plus years. I know it's supposed to be a cool fintech person. I do have like 30 credit cards, so that's a different
I was
story.
gonna say,
But
how many credit cards do you
I
have?
actually don't know, famously. I think it's 30.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
like the last time I made bank accounts was I moved to Los Angeles in an era before kind of we had, truly national banking networks. And I had grown up banking in a community bank with two branches. So I obviously had to change. Like I didn't want to use, foreign ATMs or mail my checks in or whatever. It's before remote deposit. So,
Hmm.
I went with a big bank that I could get ATMs a lot of places and just stuck. And like, is it the best experience? No. Is it fine? Like, yes. And therefore I'm just going to stick with it. Right. Because I can't imagine how hard it would be to move everything. It would take months, right? And unless they got really terrible, then they get, I think it would be fine. And so I think that's also interesting for like the fintechs who are capturing customers early on. You think about like Chime or Current, they're capturing younger customers. How do they expand their product categories so that they may keep those folks? Because they're if you only have that one product, it is easier to move somewhere else, right? If you just have checking versus a loan or something else.
Right, right. No, and that will be like the story to watch because
Yeah.
I think it really remains to be seen. Um, I have one last question for you, but before that, open it up to you because I know you have your own newsletter. How should people follow you, interact with you, or any other final thoughts on fintech or fires?
Yeah. Well, my newsletter is Cards for the Win. It's cardsftw.com. So, there's a free subscription. So I encourage people, if you want to read really nerdy credit card stuff every week, I'm your guy. And then if you want to work with me, I'm on LinkedIn, or we're at totavi.com, Totavi.com. And we love helping companies of all sizes build fintech products. We're very hands-on, kind of like digging in and working with software developers. So yeah.
Well, Matthew, thanks so much for being on the show. But before we end this conversation, what is the photo on your phone's lock screen?
Oh, it's so this painting. Well,
Oh,
this is actually a lino cut.
uh huh.
Um, and I know there's a reflection on it, but it's a
Yes.
vintage Visa, a vintage Amex, and a vintage MasterCard. I actually own these cards. They're in my card collection. And I commissioned this lino cut when I made this office design. And I have that on my phone screen, except it's turned.
Okay. There's the founder in you.
Yeah. So
That makes a lot of sense. That's cool. That's
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for being, vulnerable with me for this conversation. And it, despite what is happening, it is truly a pleasure to be in conversation with you. So thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Okay, so this episode means a lot to me because of the stakes. But one thing I learned today was super unexpected, and it's about the kind of payment cards that would make someone embarrassed to use on a date. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, for me, I would be embarrassed to pay with a crypto debit card, for example. Okay, 2 weeks from now, I'm in conversation with Ryan Felvey, a co-founder and managing director at Restive Ventures, which invest in early-stage fintech companies. We're exploring fintech trends in the year of a very different political environment. See you then.